Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. 1 year into President Donald Trump's second term, as the regional security landscape continues to evolve, South Korea's leadership is signaling a shift in strategy. President Lee Jae Myung, in his New Year press conference earlier today, acknowledged that while denuclearization remains the ideal, a phased approach offering limited rewards in exchange for freezing North Korea's nuclear development may be more realistic. This comes as both Seoul and Washington face growing pressure to reframe their policy objectives, with editorials in the U.S. press even suggesting arms control talks as a more pragmatic alternative. Now, adding to that is North Korea's silence, its deepening ties with Russia, and new regional flashpoints from Iran to Venezuela. For a clear view on the current situation, we are joined here in the studio by Kim Mok-yeon, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for National Security Strategy. Big welcome, Dr. Go.
Thank you.
And also joining us is Brian Myers, a Professor of International Studies at Dongseok University. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
So let's start a discussion with Dr. Go first. So we had heard President Lee Jae Myung's New Year's address today. So he outlined his vision for peaceful coexistence on the Korean Peninsula. How could we interpret the key messages during his speech?
Well, President Lee mentioned the traditional emphasis on the continued dialogue with North Korea. It's a script that no Korean president can deviate from. But I think more interestingly, President Lee mentioned essentially a potential, in fact, a radical departure from the previous South Korea's position regarding North Korea's denuclearization. He acknowledged that the goal of North Korea's denuclearization is pretty much unrealistic, given the fact that North Korea is rapidly expanding its nuclear arsenal. He even mentioned something that used to be classified, which is the South Korean military's estimation of how many nuclear warheads North Korea is producing every year. It's very worrisome. North Korea is apparently producing between 10 to 20 nuclear warheads, which places North Korea in a trajectory to possess more than 150 or so nuclear warheads by the end of this decade. So that's a huge number. But then that message was also part of his new narrative about engaging North Korea. He mentioned the need to put denuclearization in the afterburner and then bring the idea of arms control in North Korea. So he said definitely the first phase should be freezing North Korea's nuclear capacity expansion, then engage in arms control talk. So this is, in fact, quite a radical departure from the existing previous South Korea's government's approach to North Korea, as well as the U.S. government's position on North Korea, which is still about North Korea's denuclearization.
Right, that definitely was a very big issue that many of us would focus on. Like Dr. Go has mentioned, President Lee, he floated the idea of a phased approach, offering partial incentives in exchange for a freeze in North Korea's nuclear development. Professor Myers, do you think this could be a realistic path forward? And if so, how would it shape the security dynamics on the peninsula?
Well, I think the president is right in seeing denuclearization as a really good ideal that's not at all likely to be realized in the short term. But just calling for a phased approach is not very helpful either, I think, because Washington has been proposing phased approaches for over 30 years now to no lasting effect. And if that stuff didn't work when North Korea was really poor and weak, how can we expect it to work now that the regime has dozens of nuclear weapons and is economically in much better shape too? You know, another thing, North Korea has always mistrusted the United States, and now perhaps it has more reason than ever for that mistrust. I mean, if President Trump can turn even on a NATO ally in connection with Greenland, then how can he be trusted to keep an agreement with North Korea? So I think if you're Kim Jong-un and you're looking to pass power down to your daughter, this is not an American administration that you're going to want to make big concessions to. And of course, there are a lot of limitations to what South Korea can do in this context.
So definitely a lot has changed, and Kim Jong-un's image of President Trump would definitely be different. So this latest idea, it seems to kind of echo Washington Post editorial that suggests that U.S. should shift towards a more pragmatic arms control talks with Pyongyang. So Dr. Go, do you think we should interpret this as a total broader policy shift that both South Korea and the U.S. are starting to move away from the traditional denuclearization as their central goal?
Well, so the idea that we have to replace denuclearization, I mean, also an immediate objective of North Korea policy to something more realistic, which is entering into arms control negotiation in North Korea, sounds simple as a notion or notional change, but in fact, there's a reason why this idea of engaging North Korea's arms control discussion has been, in fact, not really emphasized all this time. The reason is because therein lies a danger in engaging North Korea's arms control talk. It's the fact that we are legitimizing North Korea's illicit nuclear development program. So the moment we switch from denuclearization to arms control discussions, we first have to legitimize or accept the prospect of taking in North Korea as a nuclear state. And that has downstream ramifications, especially when it comes to sanctions regimes. So that means that because North Korea it can be legitimized as a nuclear state, then there's no longer ground or legit ground to maintain the stringent sanctions regime that we have in place on North Korea. So then the question is, how do we reconcile these two facts? That we need to, I mean, the fact of the matter is that North Korea has to still pay a price for having violated international norms and sanctions for all this time. At the same time, be realistic about the fact that North Korea's denuclearization is probably not possible. So, and then there's so much missing in this discussion that I think it's too soon to engage in what kind of step we should take. So the editorial in Washington Post essentially is going through taking aim at the low-hanging fruits of this discussion, just putting the notion of arms control talks on the table as if that's a radical change. It is not. So I think the real innovation, real contribution to this idea should come from the reconciliation of this conflict between sanctions and the realistic prospect of engaging North Korea in some sort of a denuclearization dialogue, which could include arms control discussions.
Well, so it's a very big dilemma from our side and the U.S. also. Now, at the same time, President Lee, he emphasized efforts to restore the September 19th military agreement and to promote trust building with North Korea, while also admitting that Pyongyang still hasn't responded. Professor Myers, what do you think it would actually take to bring North Korea back to the table?
I wish I knew the answer. I think Kim Jong-un has realized that inter-Korean relations cannot really improve a lot before relations with Washington and Pyongyang do. Efforts were made during the Sunshine Policy years with Kim Jong-il, and then again during the Moon Jae-in administration with Kim Jong-un. And each of those times they were blocked by shifts in America's North Korea policy. And I think Kim has learned his lesson and will not be making that same mistake again, especially now that he has spent, 2 years now, saying that he has given up on South Korea, given up on conservatives and progressives, and no longer considers this country a dialogue partner. Now, of course, he has surprised us before. He may do so again, but let's face it, South Korea cannot offer North Korea anything of substance so long as the sanctions remain in place. As Dr. Go said, the sanctions issue is a very important one. And I think Kim Jong-un is aware of all this.
So it's quite a complex situation for South Korea. But then with the situation, Dr. Go, what can the South Korean government actually do in this current situation to make it clear that its push for dialogue would actually work?
Well, I think President Lee, I mean, I cannot really preach to the government what they should do. It's more like evaluating the steps they has taken so far. I mean, President Lee's North Korea policy is in fact a restoration of in certain aspects, a restoration of President Moon's policy on North Korea. But what's different between President Moon and President Lee's North Korea policies is the priorities that he's assigning to North Korea in the overall South Korea's foreign policy. And I think that's where President Lee is doing the things right. So what I mean by this is that President Lee is essentially announced his potential change to South Korea's approach towards North Korea's nuclear program after he has touched upon, essentially done all the homework regarding affirming the alliance with the United States, maintaining good relations with Japan, and then essentially trying to restore or improve relations with China. So essentially this represents his foreign policy priorities, and it's now that he's still reaching out to North Korea with a new proposal that North Korea might have wanted to hear all this time from Seoul. So because he's covering all the basic bases first, I think this is the right approach. No South Korean president can remain indifferent to North Korea. So, and then also President Lee is recognizing the fact that the current approach, current pathways, even though it represents the right thing to do, which is punishing North Korea for its illicit nuclear development, as well as its threats to the South, and as well as the United States and Japan, it also recognizing the fact that it's not realistic. So at least, at the very least, it's opening the stage for more dialogue, new ideas. And I think in that sense, it's doing the right approach.
Keep knocking the door towards dialogue would be very important. But let's bring in another key external factor to the current situation, the war in Ukraine, of course. So if the war in Ukraine winds down, then how might that actually change North Korea's deals with Russia, and what could that mean for its provocations or American strategy, Professor Myers?
Well, first of all, I'm not really sure the conflict will wind down. I mean, it seems less likely that President Trump is going to broker a peace agreement. The trust with Russia is just not there anymore, and NATO is itching to play a more direct role in the hostilities, even if that results in a wider war. But even if Russia wins the war outright in the next few months, say, I don't think Kim Jong-un will then suddenly reach out to Washington. On the contrary, a victory may make him all the more likely to want to stick with the winning team, which would be Russia. A lot of Western observers think that the partnership which exists now between Putin and Kim Jong-un is purely cynical, purely transactional. It's all about money. I disagree. I think there is real ideological common ground here, in the sense that both of those countries, Russia and North Korea, see themselves as fighting against a globalist system for their very survival. And Kim knows that whether America follows a hardline or softline strategy towards Pyongyang, its ultimate goal is North Korea's destruction. So I don't think that the outcome of the war in Ukraine will change his regime's relationship with Russia all that greatly.
So the relationship between Russia and North Korea, it's now past just business and transactions we're seeing.
I believe, yeah.
Now, let's turn to the developments within North Korea, Dr. Go. So lately, Pyongyang, it marked the 80th anniversary of its youth league with major ceremony. So during his speech, Kim Jong-un said, youth are at the center of bloody tragedies worldwide. Do you think he was pointing to unrest abroad, overseas, like Iran?
Oh, absolutely. I think we're acutely aware of the fact that the young generation worldwide right now are very restless. Some people call this phenomenon the Gen Z protest. So we have seen this happening not just in Iran, which is the most recent case, but also in Nepal, which led to the toppling of the government then, as well as in Indonesia. There's a massive protest complaining about widespread corruption, the upper echelons of the government, and so forth. So, so I think North Korea also faces challenges with the young generation. We know that the objective of North Korea passing very strong anti-South Korean laws, such as banning completely South Korean, watching South Korean dramas, and so forth, and imposing very heavy punishments on those who violated these laws. It clearly was targeting the young generation in North Korea. So I think this is another indirect evidence that there are fundamental social changes taking place in North Korea. The young generation in North Korea, which probably used to use to smartphones, and even though in a limited manner, so that probably some to a certain extent used to accessing external information, such as South Korean dramas and movies. It's likely to represent a major challenge to the regime's stability. And it's interesting that Kim Jong-un is acknowledging this. So in fact, this is a very novel change in North Korean society. So I think this is bears watching.
So definitely the youth in Pyongyang are also changing. But we also hear that Pyongyang is actually preparing in earnest for its ninth Party Congress. But one major question is whether North Korea's longstanding two hostile states doctrine could actually be redefined. Professor Myers, how likely do you think that is? And what would that mean for inter-Korean relations?
Well, I hate to keep sounding pessimistic, but I wouldn't expect a formal redefinition so soon because that would make the regime look unserious. And after all, from Pyongyang's perspective, South Korea's posture hasn't changed all that much since the last administration. I mean, President Lee has turned off the propaganda loudspeakers along the DMZ. He has, lifted the ban on reading North Korean newspapers, that kind of thing. But he has also pledged to cooperate with Japan on the security front. And he also promised Washington that he will increase defense spending. So I think Kim Jong-un may soften his tone somewhat. He may leave all the South Korea bashing completely to his younger sister. But I would be surprised if he chooses this time to extend an olive branch to South Korea.
So a shift there could actually reshape inter-Korean dynamics, so it will be a very tough decision indeed. Well, finally, according to North Korean state media, Kim Jong-un sent out New Year's cards to the various heads of states, but apparently Xi Jinping's name was conspicuously left out and only his title was actually mentioned. Could we read this as a sign of a possible tension between the two? And could the Party Congress shift the tone in their relationship?
Oh, I think it's definitely true that there's probably some tension between Beijing and Pyongyang right now. I think it was caused by this warm reception that China staged for President Lee recently. And then I think that really irritated North Korea a big deal. Even though we know that just back in September, North Korea had grand reception in Beijing on the occasion of the Victory Day parade, and then China, in fact, placed Kim Jong-un at the very forefront of the stage, alongside Xi Jinping as well as Putin. So I think North Korea forgot that already, and I think it's more intent on expressing its displeasure at the warm reception that China gave to President Lee. And also, I think there's something, an element that I think Professor Myers mentioned already, which is the connection between Russia and North Korea. I think we know that the North Korean media's coverage of the greeting between President Putin and Kim Jong-un was much more detailed. And then that, I think it's an evidence that North Korea is placing more value to its ideological connection. I think it's really ideological, the connection that Russia and North Korea has with Russia right now. And I think this is the fact that it's an indirect criticism of the Chinese foreign policy, especially for South Korea these days. I think North Korea is probably displeased that China is, in a way, engaged in its own brand of pragmatic diplomacy with South Korea. China has acknowledged that South Korea will always remain on the American side. There's not going to be essentially misunderstanding about it anymore. But China is essentially saying to South Korea that it's going to manage its bilateral relations with the South within this limited framework. So, and this is a very pragmatic approach on the part of Beijing, and that's exactly what North Korea is unhappy with. Now, North Korea wants China, just like Russia, be ideological, be part of this anti-global campaign that Russia and North Korea are engaged in. And so I think this is the reason why North Korea is showing its tension and displeasure at Beijing right now.
Then could we see any actions at the Party Congress or any?
No, it's unlikely. I think again the Party Congress will make conscience about the current global situation, and also there's some expectation that North Korea might say something about opening a dialogue with the United States. But I think it's going to be very indirect. I think there will be a policy inertia on the part of North Korea, which is about being hostile towards South Korea and also being indifferent to the President Trump's invitation to engage in dialogue, unless United States puts on the table something quite radically different proposal than what Washington has been saying so far, such as acknowledging North Korea as a nuclear state. So I think there will be nothing surprising coming out of the Party Congress, and that includes North Korea's message towards Beijing.
Thank you so much for your insights, Dr. Go.
It's my pleasure.
And of course, Professor Myers, we really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.